How's it going? Always well. Yeah. No, I'm good. Let's get going.
Like to help me make more content like this? Consider becoming a patron at patreon.com/secondthought. If you were to ask a handful of Americans what makes their country so special, odds are most of them would respond, our freedom. If you were to press them on the issue and ask why we experience such freedom, their answer would probably be something about the Founding Fathers, our strong military, and capitalism. Now, this video is not about the various global freedom rankings, in which America performs poorly compared to other wealthy nations. You can look.
Yeah. Okay. Mm. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Look those up on your own time.
yeah. But I mean,
What I want to focus
you would need to look at all the criteria that they're looking at. I mean, freedom is a pretty broad word. Yeah.
on is the adversarial relationship between our capitalist system and personal freedom. For decades now, the words capitalism and freedom have been treated as synonyms. But over the course of this video, I hope to show you that capitalism doesn't enable freedom at all. In fact, it actively suppresses it. This may sound like a strange claim, but bear with me. I think you'll come around by the end. Before we begin, we need to have a deeper understanding of freedom than simply, I get to do what I want. Let's start with the concepts of positive and negative freedom.
What do you mean? Hey guys, if you can hear me, just type a little comment there. Or a big one. Okay, great. Hmm. We not got some tech-savvy people in the audience. Testing, testing, 1, 2, 3. Hey, we can call this a testing phase.
Positive freedom is having the capacity to act according to one's free will. I get to do what I want is an expression of positive freedom. Negative freedom, on the other hand, is the freedom from coercion by others. One example of this would be the freedom to speak freely without fearing retribution from the state. These two types of freedom can be summed up as freedom to and freedom from. they often get tangled up and end up in conflict with one another, as in the gun rights example, I have the right to carry a gun in public, versus I have the right to walk around without the threat of being shot.
Yeah. Well, freedom is freedom of action. So, with these positive and negative freedoms, okay, it's freedom of action, and implied in freedom of action is the freedom from coercion. So the usage here is not quite correct. Would you agree? Absolutely. So in his in the example with the guns, or even with the one with the economy, he's talking about entitlements, and entitlements have got nothing to do with action. Yeah, I also seem to be lagging a little bit behind for some reason, just to add another fly to the ointment. Yeah, but we'll be fine. Just tell me in what part of the video we are. Just give me a little bit of a description, and I'll run from there. Mm. Well, I mean, what does it mean by academic exactly? Yeah, but you see, the thing is, it becomes unintelligible. You see, because what he's trying to do is slip in. He's trying to replace the word freedom with right. So if you take commensurate examples. So, for example, you say, okay, you have the freedom of speech. Now, you don't need to express the freedom of not speech. So, I mean, you don't need to, you can't obligate somebody to do something that they aren't obligated to do. This is the problem I have with this definition. What he's actually talking about is negative and positive rights. So a positive right is, I have, in terms of property, I have the right to this piece of property. This property belongs to me by virtue of my existence. Okay? Now, a negative right in terms of property would be, I have the right for my property that I own, that I've earned, for it not to be taken away. So that's what I'm saying. He's very cleverly trying to replace the word freedom, and it'll become more apparent as we go on in the video why exactly he's doing that. Well, I hope so. I just went on a rant there. Guys, can you hear Dodgy?
All right, now? Still nothing? Oh, and the dogs are going mad. Yes, we are aware of your comments. It's just not working for some odd reason.
We can see the comments there, guys.
Yeah.
Can you hear Dodgy? Nope, still can't hear you.
This is now becoming rather irritating. Because let's go default. How about now? Still nothing? Yes, please do be patient.
If you can't hear Dodgy, he says that he appreciates your patience, and we
Yes.
apologize for the inconvenience.
Oh yes, maybe I should get one of those, you know, those, what do they call those screens that they had in the old days?
Breaking transmission screen.
Yes, that thing. See, this is fine, this is fine. I don't know what else I should do. I've got all my freaking stuff correctly set up, so I have no idea.
We're giving capitalism a bad name here, Dodgy.
It seems like that. Alright, try
Dodgy,
now.
they can hear you. They say they can hear you.
Okay, is there an echo? Okay, that's great. Is there no echoes, nothing? Please God, let this be the last interruption from a technical perspective. Alright, it seems like it's fine. Alright. Let's continue. Fuck me.
Well, let's just get a confirmation. Hi guys, this is Civ. Can you hear me? Dodgy, just give them a couple of words there.
Hi guys, this is Dodgy. Can you hear me? At least you don't have an echo now. Okay.
Sounds a bit odd. Guys, Dodgy has entered the fourth industrial revolution.
Well, I mean, come on. Alright, you guys can still hear us. Alright, that's great news. Let's continue on for this freaking... Alright, here we go. Here we go.
There will always be disagreement surrounding the issue
do
of
it.
which form of freedom should take precedent. But the point of this video is that capitalism suppresses both forms. Let's take a capitalist economy as an example. Would you say that this kind of economy offers a positive or negative freedom as its value proposition? A positive freedom would be, I am entitled to a guaranteed fair share of the economy. That doesn't fit. What about a negative freedom? I am entitled to operate in the economy without coercion by powerful groups. That's closer, and that's how free market enthusiasts have chosen to describe the freedom afforded by capitalism. Here's the problem. Those people see the government as the only entity capable of exerting control over the economy.
All right. So basically what he's saying there is free market enthusiasts like myself and you think that government is the only entity that can exert control over the economy. Do you have any comment on that bullshittery right there?
Oh man, I've got mega lol going on here right now. Because the whole point of a free market, it's very simple. Hands off. That means hands off from the government, hands off from the damn multinational corporations and the industrial military complex. It means hands off from everybody. Okay, it is a free market, not a semi-free market. There's no such thing as semi-free. Now, again, what he's doing is he's slipping in another definition here. And what I want everybody to do while you listen to this video is every time he says the word capitalism from now on, I want you to replace that word in your mind with the word corporate socialism.
Yes, because that is basically what he is trying to explain here, right? Also, another interesting comment from Beast Invader is entitlement is not a freedom.
Absolutely, that's what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying, guys. This guy is not a podcaster. He's a magician. Okay, you've seen a bit of sleight of hand now. Now you're going to see things disappear completely in the next little section.
Yeah, to me, it seems like a bait and switch, right?
Absolutely.
Profess that you do not have freedom within the free market economy, and then proceed to show you why we do not have freedom in a controlled economy of sorts, whether that is through socialist corporations or through a socialist government. But that's basically what he does, right? So that's how I see it, at least.
Exactly. And just before we move on,
Yeah.
that idea of corporate socialism was actually coined by Bernie Sanders, who, as I'm sure you all know, is the big socialist candidate that's been trying to run for office for how long, wrote a book, got rich.
Yeah,
Right? But he is the one that coined that phrase,
definitely.
corporate socialism. He says that America, even now, is corporate socialism.
Yes, and here's another comment that I also want to highlight. For example, I think Beast Invader is what's his name, Jacques, on Twitter, which engaged us a few days ago, yesterday or
Oh, yeah.
yeah. So he also says government is not the only entity that can influence the economy. Obviously, people and corporations and the environment can as well. Yes. But here, free market is specifically the freedom from government regulation, not from the interference of individuals, corporations, or the environment.
Well, I mean, the podcaster's original point about a negative freedom is no coercion by powerful groups. Okay, that just means no legal privilege, so no legal coercion by powerful groups.
Yeah, and to that I don't really object in that manner, because I tend to agree
No,
with
I
him.
don't.
Because that's basically what the free market also is, right? Because let's face it, the moment that you bring in legality, the moment that you bring in a group that is more privileged legally than another group, that's governmental interference, because government rests on three pillars, right? You've got the executive, you've got the legislature, and then you've got the judicial, right? So the moment that you give more judicial power to someone, that's more state power to someone, right? Again, that's state interference, that's government regulation, that's government interference.
Absolutely.
But in today's hyper-capitalist economies, the governments themselves are beholden to the ultra-rich and massive multinational corporations. Capitalism not only fails to guarantee its people a fair share of the economy, positive freedom, it also fails to prevent the meddling of disproportionately powerful entities in the economy, negative freedom. Tax laws are always written to benefit the top 1%, energy policies always benefit massively wealthy fossil fuel companies, despite their effect on the climate. Why? Because the ultra-wealthy have bought both major political parties in the US.
Alright, so here, see, this is now the example, right, of where people sort of get confused with the regulations and the lobbying, right? So obviously corporations, large corporations, are more powerful in their capacity to lobby government, to write laws and regulations, to benefit them, right? So imagine this. This is like ESCOM, right? This is the prime example of ESCOM. Laws and regulation and policy have been written to specifically benefit ESCOM, right? Which is now a monopoly. We don't have any alternative energy supplier in South Africa because of government policy, regulation, and, legislation. Are there any thoughts that you want to add to this?
Yes, I agree with all of that. And the other thing that I want to point out is now we've reached the part of the magic show where he makes something disappear.
Oh.
Now, in the context of South Africa, with our unfree market, there are two major players that influence the economy. Now, I agree with him. Yes, corporations do influence regulation, but that's not the only group. The other important group is the workers through the unions.
Yeah. So Beast Invader also says here, for example, he says the legislature is beholden to people, not companies. I think the existence of Bernie Sanders and people successfully pushing socialist policies show that obviously laws don't always benefit big corporations. And that is also true.
Exactly. That's exactly the point I'm making. So what you actually have with the unfree market is you have this tug of war between business, or let me put it this way, between the owners and the workers. I think that's the easiest way to put it. So you have this tug of war to get power on one side or the other. So in one circumstance, you can have a situation where the workers win, or in another circumstance, you can have a situation where the owners win. They are both vying for political power through the legislature, right? But they do it both in the same way, just by different means.
Oh, yes.
They are both bribing the government. One is doing it with votes, that's the unions, and one is doing it with cold hard cash.
Yes, most definitely. And policies are rarely written to solve problems, as we have seen in South Africa, for example, the ANC's policies on broad-based black economic empowerment, equal equity, and as well as affirmative action. Even though these are staggered and brought in at different times, they all have the one single goal in mind, and that is to exert control over the economy by any means possible. So on one side, they're trying to butter up the companies by allowing them to still trade freely without them interfering too much. But on the other side, they are also interfering from the union side by allowing the unions to exert their control over these companies in South Africa. It's very much the same in the US, I would believe, whether it's environmental or whether it's labor related. And I think we're going to see the effects of that fairly soon in the future. All right.
Yep.
Can we continue?
Let's go.
This is a direct result of runaway capitalism. The accumulation of obscene levels of wealth in the hands of a tiny fraction of the population has created an owner class with godlike power. Let's take another example. America has a for-profit healthcare system. It's incredibly lucrative, worth a staggering $3.65 trillion as of 2018. In a humane system, average people would be able to afford medical treatment. They could go to the emergency room without the fear of racking up tremendous medical debt. That's not the case in America. Before the pandemic hit, there were over 137 million Americans struggling to pay their medical bills. Again, that was before the pandemic. We've had 6.5 million confirmed cases of COVID since then, and hospital stays are incredibly expensive. The fact that we have so many people having to choose between going bankrupt and risking dying of preventable medical conditions is a damning indictment of our capitalist system.
TSEK. I'm calling TSEK here, all right? Because what he fails to mention here is, right, you either pay for the shortage of resources in money or time, right? Because in our social healthcare, right, you enter into a long waiting list, to a very long waiting list. Okay, something has happened, but okay, I'm going to ignore it. Okay, there it goes. Okay, so anyway, we wait for extremely long times, right? Yes, the healthcare is more affordable, but the time, coming for getting the treatment has increased. Whereas if the cost is high, the time for getting that treatment has been decreased. Trade of value has happened somewhere. Exchange of value has definitely happened. It's not like it doesn't exist in the socialist system. It definitely does. It's just, what are you willing to pay with? Your time or with money?
Well, for me, there's an even more fundamental question to ask. Now, first and foremost, right? Healthcare is incredibly valuable. Okay. Now, compared to your life, compare it to any other commodity on the market, what is more valuable? Now, I'm not saying that healthcare necessarily needs to be expensive, but we also have to take into account all the factors that make healthcare expensive in the first place.
Yes.
Okay. Now, obviously, there will always be a premium cost. That's what you're saying. You can sacrifice the premium, right? So the premium of convenience for more affordable healthcare, or you can have premium. But what makes healthcare cost so much money?
Yes.
Now, the problem with government regulation or any kind of prescription is that you are going to lose creativity and agility, right? So even if you have laws that say, okay, a doctor needs to do this, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, those are going to add to the costs. Okay, if you say that a pharmacist can only prescribe medication, not a pharmacist can only dispense medication, then you're going to move that service on to somebody who does it more costly. But if you take it now, pharmacists can now prescribe certain medications. So you can go to the pharmacist, they can have a quick checkup, and they can give you some medicines that previously could only be prescribed by a GP or higher.
All right.
Now, I make use of that service all the time. I can't tell you the last time I went to the doctor. I just shoot down to the pharmacist. He gives me a quick checkup. He gives me my meds. End of story. And what does it cost me? Nothing. He doesn't charge for a consultation. That's what I'm saying. If you have these prescriptions, you can't even think about how you can maybe change things because it's not dynamic. It's set in stone.
Yes.
But we can come up with solutions to try and make healthcare more affordable. But in an unfree market, we can't. We first have to go to the legislature and wait years and change the... It's a mess.
Yes. The other problem is also quality, right? So instead of getting... Let's say that you do need to go for a checkup at the doctor.
Yeah.
Now, I had an aunt with a fairly serious issue, but she doesn't have healthcare, right? So she doesn't have personal healthcare at all. So she needed to go to the state hospital right here in Pretoria, Steve Biko. And, you had to go there early in the mornings. The doctor only checks her 5 minutes, 5 to 10 minutes max.
Yeah.
That is not enough to diagnose the problem. And they keep extending the time. They keep pushing it out. Meanwhile, the problem gets worse and worse and worse. right? So for me, that is the first and foremost issue is, yes, you pay for quality as well, right? It's like you say, what do you value more? What is more valuable to you, right? For me, getting the diagnosis out quickly and treating that as quickly as possible will alleviate the healthcare system more efficiently. And also, we can't rely on legislature entirely to just regulate the medical sort of market, if you will, if you would, right? But some would argue that there is some need for some regulation. But even then, is it really necessary? I wouldn't think so.
You see that we touched on this in our free market discussion. Now, the one hang-up that people might have with the free market system is that you have to take responsibility for your own life.
Yes.
Okay, so you have to figure these things out. Now people have delegated that responsibility to the government. But even in a free market system, like we discussed, all you need is information, right? And there are other ways to get that information. You can have a private civic organization that collects complaints about doctors. And trust me, if you get enough complaints about a certain doctor, or even one serious complaint about a doctor, and people have access to that information, that doctor's out of business.
Oh, yes.
Everybody in the system is accountable. So the consumer is accountable to access the information, and the service provider is accountable for the quality.
So here's an interesting question from Nevermind, before I move on to the other question. What are the flaws of social basic healthcare? Should any of the sick or injured be turned away?
I'm not sure that we can answer this question very quickly.
Yeah, but I think it's definitely a question that we do need to take into consideration when we speak about medical and medical care, because there are people that unfortunately cannot afford private healthcare. We are not like oblivious to that fact. But what we are saying is, with more professionals entering into the marketplace, the more affordable checkups, for example, at least would become. Medicine will always be expensive to some or other degree, depending on the availability of resources, manufacturing costs, and so on and so forth. The other question is, again, from Jacques. He says, to play devil's advocate, what about those that cannot take responsibility for their own lives, like the mentally handicapped or those in comas? Here I would say voluntarism definitely does play a role, because you can decide to take care of those people, even in a free market.
Yeah, look, I think maybe I can take care of both questions, but only in a very summary way. Okay, only in a very summary way.
All right.
So, should sick or injured be turned away, and what about those that can't take responsibility for their own lives? Now, the basic idea of a more libertarian free market is that the general wealth of the population will increase, competition will increase, the skewing of pricing of things due to regulations, etc. Because even pharmaceuticals, I mean, a lot of that cost comes from the R&D and from the development and jumping through all the hoops of, say, the FDA in America. Okay, it's a massive cost. Okay, that gets pushed down the line to the consumer.
Yes.
Okay, now once you have the system and everybody has been, all the boats have been risen on that tide, okay, then you are going to have a much clearer picture of the deserving poor, okay, people that genuinely need our help, not people that benefit from our over compassion. Okay, now the thing is, compassion is one thing, But coerced compassion or coerced charity is no longer compassion or charity.
Yes, it's extortion.
Exactly. So you can't on one hand say, okay, we should show compassion to people that can't afford healthcare, but on the other hand say, but screw everybody that needs to pay for that. I mean, there's no such thing as free. Either the doctors have to absorb the costs, or the hospital has to absorb the costs, or the people in the society have to absorb the costs. And by absorb the cost, I mean do it under compulsion and coercion. So eventually you're going to end up being uncompassionate to somebody.
Most definitely.
But I'm saying we believe that it's not a zero-sum game.
Yeah, no, definitely. It's not either or. It's somewhere in between. There's definitely areas of grayness that we won't be able to, how can I say it, have a clear-cut solution. There always will be some other social solution to a broad public problem, such as what Jacques and Nevermind brought up to us. It's very interesting, really, that this is exactly what we're trying to do. Perhaps a sort of, how can I say it, a sort of subsidized healthcare system, where for the people that cannot afford it, would be better suited.
Well, implementation is always the problem.
Yes.
So, but I think we're going to get bogged down in this if we spend too much time. That's why I said I can only give a summary answer to this question. You need to go into all of ethics to answer this question, and it's just subject to cover right now.
Yes. So here's another one. I think this is going to be the last question on this topic before we move on. If no one has compassion, should the man in the coma or the mentally handicapped be left in the streets? I think it's going to be very hard for no one to have compassion. But yes, there are...
You see the problem. The problem I have with these kinds of questions is that they are completely hypothetical lifeboat situations.
Yes.
We can only map out general principles. But when you're faced with a situation like this, you need to employ every little bit of ethical training you've accumulated over the course of your life.
Yes.
Right? To come up with a solution to this answer. So for me, this is, you see, what you're doing is you're taking a specific, maybe could happen, and trying to say, okay, now we're going to make a general moral judgment on the whole rest of the system because of this 0.1% of a maybe problem.
Yeah. All right. So are we going to move on?
Yeah, we'll move on. I'll tell you what, Jacques. If you're not satisfied with the answer, we'll maybe cover it at the end.
Yes. All right. So, someone has to write down the questions then. All right, here we go.
By choosing profits over all else, our hyper-capitalist healthcare industry has limited our freedom to reasonably priced care and our freedom from the fear of bankruptcy for basic health services. You have the freedom to start a business, but the end goal of capitalism is ever-increasing profits, and your business will likely fail as our system refuses to provide a level playing field. Hundreds of thousands of small businesses have been destroyed by the pandemic, but the country's billionaires and wealthiest corporations have seen a dramatic increase in net worth. Why?
All right. Do you want to add something there? Because
you'll have to tell me what's there.
He's saying that, for example, hundreds and thousands of businesses have been closed. Well, maybe not hundreds and thousands, but some businesses have closed because of the pandemic. What are your thoughts on that? Because I'm like, no, that's bullshit.
Well, Ibrahim Patel, our minister of whatever, at the beginning of the pandemic, he said that the virus doesn't travel, people do. But for some strange reason, the virus, it can't travel, but it can shut down entire countries and economies.
Yes.
Obviously not, guys. Obviously not. People shut down economies. And with regards to COVID, it is governments that shut down economies,
yes.
Not the pandemic.
Yeah. So again, even America at this stage, in some states, I believe, have shut down the economy because of the fear of this pandemic. Now, I have to ask myself, does that seem like a free market or does that seem like a controlled market?
Yeah,
That's the
I think the
question.
answer is clear.
Very clear. It's the very same with when they try to impose, for example, and this is also something that Jacques brought up to my attention, or under my attention. Um, it is also the same thing when governments decide to put sanctions on another country, right? Because that is an exertion of control over an economy. People should be able to make these decisions for themselves, right? That does mean that there will be people that probably will use China that may or may not be using child labor to create their iPhones. They might trade with that sort of country or people within that sort of sector. But it also means there will be people that will wisely decide not to trade with these sort of companies that use child labor because of the principles that they hold. Does that
Yeah,
make
yeah,
sense?
yeah, absolutely. But you see, the fundamental problem there is that you are treating your citizens as underlings, and you know better, right? I mean, if you want an idea of sanctions which come from a personal level, look at the little skirmish that India and China had. Directly after that, Indians were in the streets breaking all of their products from China and saying, sorry, we're not buying Chinese stuff. Government didn't have to impose sanctions. But the thing is, it's for people to make that moral choice themselves. It's not for a government to impose, because the government could act if it had 100% mandate from people, which it will never get for a specific topic.
Yeah. See, Jacques says sanctions can be justified, and I also said something to this extent. For example, with America sanctioning Cuba, for example, it can be argued that government has been given the mandate to express the will of the people, and therefore they have the full right to implement this sanction. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I mean, it's a euphemism. Like I said, the government, if it had 100% mandate on every single topic and subject, then we could talk about representation.
All right.
But voting for a group of people every 5 years does not representation make.
Yes. So, right. But to continue on his statement, he says sanctions can be justified. States like China and Cuba leech off the success of capitalism to enrich themselves to the detriment of their populations. And yes, there is definitely some argument to be made there. But again, the question is, do we really want to give government that much control over our personal choices?
Well, the thing is that there's a few ethical questions there. I mean, should the governments of other countries coerce the populations in those countries to act in the way that they see fit? I mean, it's one thing to say that you're representing the views of your own people, but if you want to make the argument that you're representing the views of Chinese people, okay, and you've got nothing to do with running the Chinese state, I'm not sure how you square that away.
Yeah. All right. But we'll definitely probably touch more on this at some later stage as well. I hope, at least. If not on this live stream, I definitely want to make a podcast of this where we dive a bit deeper into this. Jacques, are you fine with that? Interesting, like he mentioned, for example, Jeff Bezos, right? It's ironic that these people are being mentioned, but they're not mentioning, for example, all the risks that have been taken or all the good that they've tried to do within these communities. Say what you want about them. Okay, can we continue?
Yep.
All right.
Because they were taken care of. They were bailed out or able to capitalize on the suffering of others. As of June, the country's wealthiest people had gotten $637 billion richer over the course of the pandemic. Capitalists applaud the fact that anyone can start a business. But how can you compete against these corporate leviathans that monopolize the economy and can demand whatever legislation they want from those in power? There's no freedom there for the average person. Okay, but what about the job market? Free market enthusiasts will say that relationships between workers and employers are free and equal. If you hate your job, you have the freedom to leave and find another one. But if small businesses can't pay you a decent wage because they can't compete, and large companies are all trying to maximize profits by cutting costs and extracting as much labor from their workers for as little money as possible, you're unlikely to find a job that will offer a living wage. To make matters worse, capitalism treats basic necessities like commodities. Healthcare, food, water, shelter. These things can all be exploited to make a profit. The average American is compelled to sell their labor and hours of their life for whatever wage they can find simply to cover the skyrocketing cost of housing. That's not freedom. That's coercion. Take the workplace.
All right. So, automatically, I've got an axe to grind here, because you do have the freedom to decide to sell your labor, if you really do believe in the value of labor, for whatever price is put on the contract. Right? If you don't agree with the price put, you can move on to the next person that can afford that.
Yeah, absolutely. And competition is something that not only applies for consumers, it also applies to workers.
Yes.
If you have more businesses, right, you have more choice.
Yes.
So if you have an unethical employer, shall we put it that way broadly, and you have your civic organization that has let you know, okay, this guy is making his people work 24 hours a day, most extreme example. Okay, you know that you don't have to go work for him. Trust me, he needs workers, and he is going to adjust his policies.
Oh, yes. For example, a personal example here is there's a business close to me that does aluminium window framing and shop framing and so on and so forth. They're advertising for a draftsman probably now for 6 months with a very low salary, like something like 6,000 or 7,000 rand a month. But he has to have a lot of qualifications. But now after 6 months, they've upped the price because no one applied for that. Again, the free market at work. Personal choice, information gives you this outcome, right? Also, very interesting. He also neglects to mention that because of, as Beast Invader or Jacques points out, he also fails to mention that because the free market treats these things as commodities, housing, water, medication, food, and so on and so forth, that they have become more affordable. The podcaster seems to somehow neglect to mention that. It's very interesting.
Yeah, well, the other thing that he's failing to mention is that a commodity is something that is useful and valued.
Yes.
Okay. Which means that it has value.
Yeah.
Now, I'm not sure what he's trying to imply here, that the necessities of life, things that people value, should have no intrinsic value.
Because it's really silly, right? Do you value human life? Yes or no? Yes, all right. What do I need to sustain that human life? I need food, I need water, I need housing, I need medication. So all these things would have an intrinsic value attached to it. I think that socialists don't really think that far.
Yeah, maybe not intrinsic. Maybe intrinsic is the wrong word. But it would have a definite value to the valuer, which is a human being.
Yes. All right. Can we continue on?
Yeah, I'm good.
Place itself. You are subjected to the whims of the employer, no matter how demeaning or unfair. Constant schedule changes, demands to come in to cover a shift, restriction of freedom of speech. You are completely at the mercy of someone who can fire you for any reason or no reason at all, simply because you cannot afford not to work. The vast majority of people don't have the luxury of taking time off to find another job, because that would likely mean missing a rent payment. You will be kicked out of your home and starve if you don't engage in the soul-crushing meat grinder that is the American labor market. That's not freedom. I can hear it now. If you don't like it, you can just leave. How? How can the average American disengage with this coercive system? Even if...
All right, so here is a very interesting question that the podcaster basically puts to us. He says, for example, well, if you don't like it, you can leave. But how can you leave if you don't? Because that's what we're going to see further on. If you don't have the capital to leave.
Yeah. You see, this is the only place where the podcast is using the word freedom correctly.
Yes.
But what he means by freedom is the freedom to be free from the obligations and necessities of existence.
Yeah.
Now, the thing is, existence for human beings gives us a choice to live or a choice to die. Now, if you choose to live, you've got obligations, my friend. Those aren't imposed by the capitalist system. They are not imposed by anything else except by your own nature.
Yes.
It's inescapable.
Yeah.
Okay? If you want to say that it's coercive, then you have to look in the mirror and say to yourself, stop coercing me. Protect me from myself, please.
Oh dear. That's actually way better put than what we discussed earlier. So, okay. We're going to see him trying to like show us that, how can I say it, that you can't escape the system because you might not have like the freedom to leave because you might not have the capital. But again, that freedom is not imposed or, how can I say, interceded or restricted from or by capitalism. It is restricted by yourself. All right, so we have one comment again. They say, I have to agree with the podcaster here. In a country like ours, where there simply isn't jobs available, employers will have more leverage over employees. But that is an argument for more economic freedom, not less. And I totally agree with that. Because in a controlled market, what you find is that innovation goes down. People don't want to put themselves on the line. People don't want to create more businesses because that business might be, as the awful word from the government would say, expropriated at some point for the greater good. God forbid that I ever use that word again. All right.
Yeah, and I agree with you, Jacques. That's exactly our entire argument.
Yeah.
The thing is, all the legislations that they create to try and make prosperity actually have the negative effect. It's a self-fulfilling prophecy, right? So the socialists will say, we need to regulate the market for this and this purpose. And what they are trying to achieve, they actually end up contradicting completely in practice.
Yes. Because again, the more restrictions you put in place, the smaller you make the competitive market. So you always create this sort of groundwork for monopolies. And the moment that there's a monopoly, then you won't have any freedom to pick and choose between employers. Again, Eskom, Telkom, and so on and so forth. Even Transnet is a prime example of this. If you want to have a rail station and you want to be a railing business where you take coal from the mines to the washer to the factories or to the power plants, you can't do that because Transnet owns those liberties. You cannot interfere in that whatsoever, and that is governmental interference at its finest. All right.
Yeah, I think the important point to make is that show me a monopoly that was never created without some sort of government privilege.
Oh yes, that's going to be a fun one. The challenge accepted, sir.
You know where to find me. I'm on Twitter.
Yes, definitely. All right, let's continue.
Go.
If you wanted to, say, live on your own land and produce your own food, thereby removing the power of the coercive capitalist system. In order to escape, you need capital. You need enough money to buy the land, which is already impossible for most people, then the funds to build a home, however small, and acquire supplies to grow food, find a way to collect water, and so on. The problem is, there's no way for the average American to accumulate that kind of money. The vast majority of capital is concentrated at the very top, and it's only getting worse. In 2019, the richest person on the Forbes Top 400 list was 21 times wealthier than the richest person on the list in 1982, adjusted for inflation. That money isn't just coming out of thin air. It's being siphoned from the rest of the population. That money...
All right, so basically here he says that wealth is being siphoned from the rest of the population to the 1%ers at the top.
Oh man, this one made my head explode. But it always makes my head explode, right? So you got people, just imagine, they're sitting there in front of their PC, right? And they're on Twitter and they're bitching about Amazon, right? God, Amazon, Jeff Bezos is so rich. And in the other window, right next to Twitter, they're like, geez, check this stuff on Amazon. Order. Now, what I hate about this is that the podcaster is making the 1% seem like they go into people's homes at night, right? And they go through their wallets and they take a little bit out every night, right? And then they go and put it in their bank and go on their luxury holidays.
Yeah. Also,
you see, the great thing about a free market is if you don't want Jeff Bezos to be richer than God, stop buying his stuff.
Stop using
Simple.
his services. Yes, stop it, because he gets money from the services that you use, right? He might not be producing these things, but he's definitely procuring these things, and you're using his service to procure it, right? So here's another few interesting remarks. From Nevermind, for example, he says, we all want our place by the river. Yes, I also want my place by the river because I like fishing. But I'll need to save for that, right? It doesn't mean that I can just have it. Jacques also says, or asks, what is the podcaster's alternative? In a socialist system, you will also not necessarily have a better job to go to. Not only that, Jacques, in a socialist system, you do not have the option of opting out. Right? It's imposed to you. There's no opting out. The only way you opt out is if you escape the country. That is not freedom at all. At least in a free market society, you would be able to opt out on your own volition by trying to get the capital to purchase the property that you want to be self-sustainable on, right? Another interesting comment that he makes is, he says, the author is confusing free trade with autarky. So if you're there.
Yep.
All right.
Sorry?
So what are your thoughts on that?
Sorry, I missed the last sort of 30 seconds.
Oh, okay. So basically, Jacques also says that the author is confusing free trade with autarky.
Oh, I'm going to need a definition there.
Right, so autarky is what the Nazi Germans tried to do. Right, so it's the idea of the shrinking markets really plays a role into this. So it's this idea that the market cannot expand, it can only shrink, right? Basically what socialists argue. The piece of the pie is, fixed. So the more shares some people have in this pie, the less there are for other people to have, right? That's basically it. So autarky says that you need to start to produce everything within your own borders or for your own self.
Yeah, that argument, and he made it a little bit before about, you can go live on a farm. Okay. Now, the point of civilization is progress. Not progress at any cost, but progress. Yes. Okay. The agrarian age was left behind for a reason. There's a reason why people worked 12 hours in factories and not however long on a farm. So this idea that we must just all go be subsistence farmers is precisely the antithesis of civilization.
No, definitely. It also plays a big role in the division of labor, right? So his idea is to not have that sort of division of labor, or perhaps have that, but not to the extent that we currently have it. So for example, I turn this bush for you and you use it in some sort of vehicle of some sort, and that creates a value chain, right? But I think what he's trying to say is, if you're going to do something, you need to do it from the start to the finish. And that to me is very problematic, right? It's even been problematic in the USSR. It's been problematic in China, which is also why they moved away from these sort of models. Yeah. So,
Yeah.
right. Nevermind is asking healthy changes. Healthy changes in regards to... Well, we'll figure that out.
Yeah, let him
Yeah.
comment.
Let's continue
let's
on while we wait for him.
Money also is not going back into the economy. It's being hoarded and used to buy legislation favorable to giant corporations. Meanwhile, real wages have gone down, unions have been all but eradicated, preventing collective bargaining for better treatment, and most people can't cover a surprise $400 expense. You don't even have the freedom to disengage from the capitalist system. This system, and by extension your life, is owned by the ultra-wealthy. This is the logical conclusion of capitalism, and decades of consolidation of wealth and power in the hands of an increasingly small number of oligarchs.
All right. So, basically, I don't know if you've caught up yet on this, but again, you have the freedom to escape in a free market, right? You can escape the free market and still live in that country if you really want to. But in a socialist country, again, I'm just reiterating this, you can't escape because it's the government, it's the very entity that's controlling the fucking borders that you can't escape from. No matter where you go in that country, the government will always be there. Right? And then he obviously points out to this as well. Larger governments lobby government to create legislation and regulation which allows them to create monopolies.
Yep.
So he's not really disproving that capitalism is not free, but he's basically proving that socialism is the cause of all the social problems he's facing or seeing.
Well, that's why I said a useful thing is just to replace the word capitalism for corporate socialism, because that's actually what he means.
Yeah. All right. So Nevermind finally commented on the healthy changes. So he says, healthy changes from subsistence farms to the tech age. That's the question. Local time markets are great, and Gogo agrees too. Yes. Well, I mean, I also buy local because the local business to me adds more value to my surroundings. And instead of contributing to $1 million corporation, I'm contributing to the subsistence of another person or another family, if you really want to, think of it like that. Also, my local businesses are closer than the larger corporations. So here's a hardware shop right around the corner where I live. Chamberlain's is about 1 kilometer further away, right? So, but there's still that idea of cost, right? I pay more or less the same whether I drive to Chamberlain's, right? Because I still need to take into account fuel and so on, or whether I just go to the hardware store right around the corner, buy what I need, and come back home, and I walk. All right.
Yeah.
Anything you want to add to that?
Well, I think the comment's slightly just above strengthening diversity. If I'm understanding the comment there, that's the thing. We might be locked into some sort of patterns around how cities are structured, etc., etc. But if you want the agility to have all these variations in the market, then we need to get rid of regulation of the market.
Yes, most definitely. Most definitely. Overregulation definitely stifles business growth. All right, let's continue.
Capitalism cannot solve these problems because it doesn't recognize them as problems. The system is designed to allow for maximization of profit and will always yield monopolies and vast inequality. Corporations like Amazon can end careers and the future of entire cities by picking up and moving to a better tax haven. And they will, every time, because it makes them more money. Living your life at the mercy of the owner class doesn't sound like freedom to me. The vision of a free America and opportunity for all doesn't exist. Our lives are becoming less and less free. We have less time to spend with our loved ones, less money to put away for the future. Our life expectancy is decreasing. We can't get medical treatment because it will bankrupt us. We can't start a business because it will be crushed by the major players or left to die when the next pandemic comes along. And the government will always side with the ultra-wealthy instead of the average American because both parties are entirely bought and paid for. At this point in history, there is nothing capitalism can offer us that a more humane system could not. It's just a matter of realizing that we've been conditioned by decades of propaganda to see capitalism as a synonym for freedom. Capitalism does not provide freedom. It suppresses it. Okay, so what's the solution? That depends on who you ask. Some people think we can reform the system at the ballot box. Others think electoral politics is a dead end. The means may not be clear, but the end goal is: we need to replace capitalism with a system that values human life over profits.
Guess what system? Guess what system he wants to replace capitalism with?
Socialism!
Definitely. I also find it very funny. Again, he just assumes that government will always side with the wealthy, right? Again, like Jacques pointed out earlier in the stream as well, that's not always the case because of socialist policies that also get pushed through, right?
Exactly.
It's like, no.
It's a seesaw.
Yeah, it's like it's a power play because how many votes can I win to remain in power for as long as possible versus how much can I extort from the businesses to favor them as long as possible or to favor me for as long as possible. Either way, it always plays in the hands of those few who are in power. And I always say this, whenever government does something for the greater good, it's never for the people or for the majority of the people or for all the people. It's for the few that are in power. Never for us, never for the plebeians like you and myself.
Yeah, well, when we discussed, society, right? Because, the alternative is to say for the good of society. And we were discussing where you might find society. The closest answer I can give to that question is Parliament. If you want to know where society is, go to Parliament. You'll find society there.
Oh, yes, definitely. But perhaps you need to elaborate a bit on that.
Well, I mean, take the context of COVID, right? So everybody inside Parliament has no problem with the restrictions because, well, they favor them. They are not us and we are not them.
Yes. All right. Let's continue. All right. So some interesting comments here. I want to read them to you because it's actually quite funny. So, Nevermind is taking the piss at us, it seems, or at least at Bezos and so on. Ah, fresh water, bottled and bubble wrapped by Bezos. Would you like a bag? Oh, no, you gotta have a sense of humor with these guys. Like, oh, I love these people. They make my day. All right, let's continue.
One that actually does expand our freedoms and provides every person with a life of dignity. If you've been watching my channel for a while, you'll know that I think socialism is the answer. Look at the things we have today that are a direct result of socialist policy. Child labor laws, the weekend, the 40-hour work week, Medicare, Social Security, workplace safety laws, the 8-hour workday, and many others. Look at this list. Does anything stand out to you? Besides being staples of modern life, each of these policies defies the capitalist goal of profit over all else.
But so he gave a list there of things that socialism supposedly achieved, right, within the capitalist system. And yes, there are things that socialists definitely did help to improve society as a whole, perhaps. But is it really in spite of capitalism or because of capitalism that these things could have been achieved?
Well, there's 2 points I want to make here. So there was the list just before it, right, where there was that picture of that politician.
Yes.
And his campaign, points, if I can put it that way.
Yeah.
Now, the irony there is that you could have all of those things to whatever degree you wanted in a worker co-op. Now, here's the irony, right? Socialists always punted a worker co-op. But a worker co-op is only possible in a free market.
Precisely.
So put that in your pipe and smoke it.
Because again, it's private ownership. Again, we're touching on private ownership here, right?
Exactly.
In a controlled market, there is no private ownership because the government controls the property. It controls both, to use the socialist or Marxist rhetoric, it controls both the means and distribution of production, right? But in a free market, a group of people can own a factory, can own a company. And it would still be considered private enterprise. It would still be considered private property, insofar that the government cannot interfere into that. And the guy from the street can't just walk in and take whatever he wants. He still needs to purchase that property. He still needs to use that property at a cost. So again, it's built on the capitalist system, on the free market system.
Exactly, and I mean that's one of the complaints, or why aren't the socialists on the side of the free market? Because if we had a free market, right, and major corporations didn't have the legal privilege to stifle small business, because I'll agree, they probably do that.
Oh,
But
yes.
in a free market, you could check your chommies there on the other side of the street and say, "Hey, Oaks, let's go start a business," right? Now, the internal governance of that company is completely up to you, right? You can choose a director, or you guys can be directors for a week, or you can democratically vote on every decision. And if you want to pay your cleaner $1 trillion and you guys get a salary of $10,000, nothing stops you.
Exactly.
Nothing stops you. I don't understand this concept that we need to legislate for something that you would be completely free to do in a free market system. It's counterintuitive. It doesn't make sense.
No, it does not make sense at all. Just to highlight, never mind here. Thank you very much, sir. One day, hopefully, I will be able to have super chats on this channel. So yeah, but I also don't want to monetize the channel because of the supposed controversial content that we are handling. Okay, let's continue on. Because
never mind. You can consider this our voluntary gift to you.
Yes, definitely. We do this voluntarily. We're not coerced, sir. We're not coerced. There's no socialist standing behind me holding a gun. All right, so let's continue on, because I do love myself these pictures of child laborers. Laborers. I love them. I'm a heartless capitalist, so it warms my little heart.
There is. Sorry, can we stop just for one point?
Yes.
That the second list, right, of the 8-hour workday and all of that, and the child labor laws and whatnot. Again, prescription ruins creativity.
Yes.
It ruins agility. Now it's become a convention that we have the 8-hour day or a 40-hour work week or the weekend. But now it's become a convention. Now we're sort of stuck in it.
Yes.
I mean, if you look at COVID, how many people just realized, a lot of us can actually just do this thing from home. We don't really even need to go into the office.
Oh, yes.
And how many of them now are actually trying perhaps a shared week, a couple of days at work and a couple of days at home, whatever, maybe even a shortened work week.
Well, it's not just that, right? It's also from the clients that I have, the few that did survive COVID, if we can call it that, because we all know COVID.
The government, you mean?
Yeah, it's code. Whenever I say COVID, it's government. So it's very ironic, right? So, yeah, they're a software development company, right? And their production has increased threefold in less hours than the prescribed 40-hour, months or weeks or whatever you want to call it, the 40-hour week or something. Yeah, 40-hour week. But it's amazing that they can grab so much value now, and they have so much time. They can now actually, afford better salaries to these people because now they're winning more contracts. And these people aren't on the streets. They're not stressing, driving to work anymore and wasting an hour, 2 hours on the road on fuel and so on. So their livelihoods did increase, although their how can I say it? Yeah, their means of livelihood increased, if that makes sense.
I mean, there's a double-edged sword to these things. And say if you've got a 40-hour work week by law, right? That means that you can't work less than it.
Yes.
Because if you work less than it, then you would fall under a semi-permanent person.
Oh, yes.
Right? And even take a minimum wage. If you impose a minimum wage on businesses, then they just go, okay, well, that's what I'm going to pay. Could have paid you more, but I'm not going to.
Yeah.
Maybe I could have paid you less.
Yeah.
But you completely cut off the more positive scenario.
Oh, yes. See, this is also something that I think Dumo touched with Kyle in social media, for example. Kyle was making the case for universally based income or minimum wage. No, minimum wage. Minimum wage.
Minimum wage.
Yes.
Minimum wage. Yeah.
Right. So he was arguing that, for example, in Australia, more people are being employed because of minimum wage. But again, if the minimum wage is below the economic threshold of the acceptable salaries, right, or wages, then yes, more people will be employed for a lot less than they are actually worth in that economy, right? If minimum wage is higher than the economic value of that person, of the wages of that person, then people will have less employment in that sector because of minimum wage. It's really a give or take scenario depending on how high the minimum wage is compared to the economic value of the labor of that person.
Yeah. And one last point, please. I beg your indulgence here.
All right.
The idea of a work week or a workplace or work safety or a wage didn't exist until capitalism.
Oh, yes.
I think we must also just keep that in mind.
Of course.
There was no such thing as a living standard until capitalism.
Yes.
Before then, it was good luck surviving.
Yes.
That's your standard of living.
Yeah. And I mean, it's evident, like, even self hygiene, for example. So the coal miners in Britain, for example, removed all their teeth at the age of something like 12 because they couldn't afford dental care. It was just too costly. But show me a person that forcibly removes their teeth now, because it's
Mitchell's
too...
brain.
Well, I mean, no, we're not touching that. No. Yeah. But anyway,
I think we move on now.
yeah, let's move on because no, I'm having mental images. No. Oh, welcome, Mr. Patriarch. No, it's all fine, and never mind. Yeah, go have fun. It's Heritage Day after all. Go celebrate it.
Workers because they were small enough to crawl inside giant factory machines and you could pay them less. We're used to an 8-hour workday today, but in the past, people would work 12 hours or more in a shift. Making workplaces safer was expensive, and business owners didn't want to do that. Without socialists and other leftists fighting to keep capitalism from going completely off the rails, we'd be in an even worse place than we are today. Human life is infinitely more valuable than corporate profits. Many Americans are finally beginning to see that the system doesn't work for them, that it's built on the exploitation of their labor, that they will never reap the benefits of their own hard work. By its very definition, capitalism demands a weakening of democratic systems and the suppression of the vast majority of people. Capitalism is not freedom. Capitalism is the enemy of freedom. It needs to go.
I can't help it.
No, I saw that comment as well, Mr. Patriarch. Wow, really? Oh no. Look, it's not just Mitchell's Plain. I can tell you that the place where I grew up, yeah, they also did that.
Jeez, YouTube is gonna fuck us up.
But we're not saying what they're doing. We're not saying what they're doing, nor what it is. We're not. We're not touching that. We're not touching that. All right. So I paused the video because I want to touch on something. Because he's now talking about the exploitation of labor, right? Because apparently, if you're going to somehow be part of this capitalist system, you will never see the value of your labor. But that's utter bull. Because again, you're entering into a voluntary contract between yourself and the employer, between yourself and society if you are the employer, right? So there is definitely value to your labor that you will see, that you will witness. I think they don't really think of it like that. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, again, this comes back to the podcaster's idea of freedom, and there's this definite sense that he wants to be free from his own nature. So if he could just be free from his own nature, then he could walk into a job and negotiate a massive salary, right? And because of the self-fulfilling prophecies of the unfree market, he's got no choice but to go work for the capitalist instead of opening up his own business.
Yes. Or to try and gain enough capital to run away to the farm or rural area that he bought so that he can escape the capitalist system, which he can't do under a socialist system, because on the socialist system, everybody has to contribute to the society. Yeah, very interesting.
Well, they have to contribute to themselves, and those interactions, that web of interactions, is actually what moves society forward. So if we were all on a subsistence farm, society as an aggregation of what we are capable of collectively, right, would stagnate.
Absolutely.
Maybe you'll have a little bit of innovation here and there, sporadic, but the thing is, you're too busy surviving, you're too busy planting crops and milking cows and stuff.
Yeah.
You know, the division of labor helps us to specialize. You know, it helps us to have people like Albert Einsteins or Elon Musk's.
Yeah.
I mean, just imagine poor Elon Musk on a farm here in Vrystaat. Okay, we wouldn't have the Cybertruck. We wouldn't now be talking about going to Mars.
Yeah, or SpaceX or any of the other innovations that he has brought to the front. I might not like Elon Musk here and there. I think some of his ideas are a bit insane, but I can't argue about the way that he's handled it and the innovations that he has brought because of the division of labor. Imagine him building the Tesla on his own. It would never have worked.
Yeah, exactly. I mean,
Yeah.
there's this idea that capitalists are against cooperation. No, we're not. We are only against involuntary cooperation.
Yes.
There's great benefit to cooperation. If there wasn't, then we would all have just remained on the little plot, scratching our living in the earth.
You know, and we'd still be wearing animal felts, you know, as underwear. So there's that as well. Just saying, you know, society evolves, or infrastructure and markets evolve alongside human culture and human cooperation, willing cooperation.
Yeah. Jacques has got an interesting comment here. Did you see it?
Yes, capitalism demands a weakening of the democratic system. Insane. I totally agree with that. The democratic system, you know, undermines itself.
Yeah, well, I mean, obviously there's different forms of it, but I mean, as we discussed in our free market talk, a capitalist or a free market, let's just stick to free market.
Yes,
Yeah.
please.
In a free market, you have the most direct, most immediate, and most effective democracy the world has ever known. If there is any entity, right, first of all, you have the option not to contract or enter into any relationship with that person, right? So in the case of Eskom, if Eskom doesn't give you electricity, goodbye Eskom, we'll find somebody else. Now that is the best way to vote with ideas.
Yes. As you said, vote with your randellas.
Exactly.
I love that. I love that word, randella. All right, let's continue.
We can choose to replace it with a system that strengthens democracy and expands individual freedom, where we're not held hostage by obscene housing, education, and healthcare costs, where the ultra-wealthy no longer have complete control over government. We can say no more to the two-party corporate duopoly and demand representatives who cater not to special interests, but to the average citizen. We can build a system that cares for the survivability of the planet and the future of all people. A system that is truly worthy of being called free.
I want to stop there because this is where I said, for example, to Rob in our group, I said, well, the guy is trying to pull on heartstrings as well, right? You can see it within the images, the music playing in the background, and the way that he's positing like socialism is better than capitalism because it will protect the environment, it will protect the people, it will create more equality in some sort, and it will protect democracy without realizing that democracy, instead of having it within the free market, as you and I have discussed, it is only shifted to a select few, right? So you either have, in his view, oligopolies, or, in my view, oligarchy. Because any democracy where you no longer have the vote of your randelas or your dollars is a focus or is a concentration of power in a select few. That is an oligarchy, according to me, at least. It's very ironic, though.
Yeah, but I mean,
because the free market would give rise to solutions to climate change, would give rise to the problems in housing and welfare and medical aid and so on and so forth. But trying to limit that through legislation, through the oligarchy, or through the representative democracy under the socialist regime, that would not yield any solutions, only more legislation, only more restrictions.
yeah, but I mean, it's clear why. I mean, if you take our government's response to COVID, right? Now, the thing is, COVID is not a political problem.
No.
The environment is not a political problem. They are both, in a way, problems of technology.
Yes.
Okay, so on the COVID side, what we needed was a medical response, not a political response. And when it comes to the environment, I can tell you now, no amount of voting, no amount of legislation or public proclamations is going to solve that problem. What is going to solve that problem is a technological solution.
Yeah. So Jacques says, what's wrong with the two-party system? As long as the representatives are directed directly, as in the US, this does not matter. You can also have other parties on a lower state level. For instance, the Libertarian Party in Florida, even if Florida is Republican in the Senate, if this makes sense. And it does.
Can I take this one?
Yeah.
Sorry. Now, if you vote with your randelas, you have one man, one vote. Okay? If you have a direct democracy, then you have a situation where you have 51% vote. Okay? So 51% win, 49% lose. Then if you have a representational democracy, I don't even know why they call it a representational democracy, because it doesn't represent anything.
Yeah, it's still the same.
You're voting for people that make decisions regardless of what you think they're of. Does that answer your question, Jacques?
Right. So while we wait, let's finish this monstrosity. Look, again, the propaganda has been done really good. The quality is excellent, but the points are bullshit. Sorry.
I mentioned at the beginning of this video that this kind of content is supported by my patrons on Patreon.
Okay.
This type of video, while
I think we are done, because now he's espousing to capitalism to support his socialist interests. So, yeah, that was an interesting one.
Yeah, that was a marathon. Jeez.
First, the technical issues, which contributed to probably half an hour, if not more. But yeah, and then, yes. But that's basically all. But yeah, closing thoughts, maybe, before we start with maybe questions.
I don't think I have closing thoughts. I think I hope that we took that apart quite well.
I hope so as well. It's just too bad for the sound in the beginning. But I think I've got it fixed now. It was a good trial run on a big socialist YouTube platform as well.
Hey, it's free. You get what you pay for.
Yeah,
Right?
yeah. Look, you gotta understand if you want socialist YouTube videos, quality is definitely going to suffer, right? So once I can monetize this, I might consider. Yeah, but we'll see. We'll see.
Yeah. We'll maybe have to shill as hard as the communist shilling there.
Yeah, I know. Twerk my non-existent boobs or something. I don't know. We'll see. Right. Guys, thank you very much for being with us. Yeah, I hope we answered some of the questions. If we haven't answered all of them, please leave them in the comment section. And Siv and I will try and make a follow-up podcast on those questions. You can also reach us on Twitter. I did not put your Twitter handle or mine actually in the description, but I will do that right after this video has finished. So I'll put that in there as well. You can DM us, you can add us directly, and we'll try and answer all your questions there as well. If we deem it necessary to make more videos of it, yeah, we'll definitely do that. If you liked it, please like, please share, and subscribe. Thank you all. Cheers.
Cheers.